Welcome to the Catalyst Sale podcast. Sales, as we know, is another word for problem solving. Well, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know that that's how I look at things. We all have problems that we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there. One big challenge for business leaders, entrepreneurs, folks who are starting their own business or transitioning to another is sales. Well, why do we struggle with sales? This could be due to a lack in confidence, comfort, just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve at sales and problem solving through process, practice, frameworks, and thinking. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to catalystSale.com/game plan, you'll find more information. I'm really excited to have Liz Heiman join me on the podcast today. Liz is the CEO and Chief Sales Strategist at Regarding Sales, and another one of those friends that I've made through some of the awesome discussions that have happened on Clubhouse. Liz is another one of the contributors that you can find on Saturday morning during Jeff Bajorik's Sales Talk Radio. Liz, it is awesome to see you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing awesome. But we met each other through a group that Jeff Bajorik has cultivated and continued to build on Clubhouse that meets up on Saturday mornings with Sales Talk Radio on Clubhouse. And it's great to have you on the Catalyst Sale podcast.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here. It's fun. It's fun to get to be on podcasts and have great conversations with smart people. So
what kind of conversations have you been having on Clubhouse? Like what have you taken away from it? And we've had a couple of different people who've been on Clubhouse before. And that's one of the questions I end up asking them is, what are you getting out of Clubhouse as an application?
It's very interesting. And people have been asking me this. So I've actually been asked to speak about Clubhouse several times recently in presentations and stuff. It's really interesting. I think one of the coolest things for me as in my role as a sales consultant is that I'm meeting people who can refer me and they're getting to actually see me in action. So whereas usually my referrers, they know me and they like me, but they've never actually seen me in action. Mike, you've seen me in action. So you could say, oh, I want you on my podcast, right? So people, because we're actually being ourselves, having conversations, you know what I would say. Somebody knows how I would treat their customer if they refer them. So that's one of the things for me that's really cool. And in terms of the kinds of conversations, oh my goodness, they range like all over the board. So sometimes we're just talking general about sales. Sometimes I spend a lot of time in startup rooms helping founders understand sales because it's not part of what they normally think about. So we've had some great conversations about go-to-market strategy and special things that sales founders need to understand about sales from a founder perspective and credibility. And I've had a blast really talking about all kinds of things.
What are some of the common themes you're seeing around things that founders struggle with when it comes to sales?
Okay, here's my favorite new thing. You ready? My favorite new thing is founders going, I didn't know I could ask that. That is so exciting to me that they realize like you can ask anything you need to ask to qualify your client and to help them make a good decision. If you want to ask a question to do either of those two things, you're allowed. And I keep hearing it over and over again. I'm allowed to ask that? It's okay to ask that? Absolutely. You can ask that. That's been fun.
We were on a call. We were on one of the, I still call them calls. They feel like giant conference calls or chat, like these live conference calls where we're not on Zoom meetings. We can't see each other. We've got a lot of people talking and you see people kind of come up and raise their hand there's an etiquette about coming off of mute when you're ready to speak, to say something, or clicking mute a couple of times to applaud. This kind of inner culture of communication that happens. But there was someone on there, I think the founder, his name was John, who said that when you were talking about objection handling, and it was objection handling around pricing, I think, and he was just shocked that he could ask the question. And it's fascinating to hear people kind of open up. And the ahas for me, the thing that I love seeing is that many times the ahas are the simple things, and many times it's the simple things that many of us professionals continue to miss on periodically, either just because we get caught up in a rut or we get caught up in the noise or we're going a little bit too fast, but we get away from the basics. So that's one of the interesting things that I'm seeing out there as well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to help people realize that this is not this big, bad, scary thing, that it's just something we all can do all the time. And it's just about solving problems and communicating, and it's okay. It's really going to be okay, because I think a lot of founders are really struggling with the idea that they just don't have a clue what to do. And they do, and they will, and they'll get it.
What's the best way to make it through the struggle?
I think it's to go out and do it. I think that's the biggest thing, is because I don't know what to do, I'm just not going to do it. And I think I always suggest call somebody you know first. And if you don't know anybody who would buy from you, call somebody you know who could refer somebody who would buy from you, because then they'll warm up a conversation and make it easier for you. So for founders, for me, call people you know, even if maybe they're in the right field, but they're not going to buy from you. Call them anyway and have a conversation and talk about it and see what they say, and get more comfortable with talking about what you're doing with people.
I know that we want to get into some discussions around just some of the fundamentals around pipeline and prioritization. But one of the other things I'd like to talk about just before we do it, because it's something that we'd also talked about in one of the rooms that we were in, was this whole idea of ideal customer profile. So how do you define ideal customer profile?
So your ideal customer is the customer that is most likely to buy from you in the shortest period of time, is most likely to be happy with the outcome, be profitable, continue to buy from you. So that's what our ideal customer is. And so now, knowing that, we have to create a profile for what that person is, right? So if I have customers already, I can look at the customers I have and say, well, which ones are most profitable? Which ones are easiest to work with? Which ones are most fun? Which ones had the shortest sales cycle? I can look at all of the people I've called or all of the people I've tried to sell to and see which were there industries or kinds of companies that didn't want to buy from me, that fell through at the end. I can look at things like timing, when. We think about ideal customer profile as being demographics primarily, which is how big are they, where are they located, those kinds of things. And then there's this other thing we call psychographics, which is their belief system and the way they behave that makes them either good or bad customers. But there's this other thing about timing that I think is really important. So my customers, my ideal customer, when they get funded and start getting a lot of pressure from investors. That's a when ideal customer profile. So if we can add that timing in, or trigger, sometimes we call it a trigger, that helps us to find the ideal customer profile. So we have to understand first, what are the kinds of customers? What are the things that make a customer ideal? And then we can say, okay, now that I know I want them quick close cycle, higher close ratio, all these kinds of things, which are the clients that are most likely to do that? And if I don't have history, then think about, who did you really design your product for? I know everybody buys your product. Everybody can buy it. But who did you really design it for? And who's going to get the best result? So yeah, everybody can buy it, but are they necessarily going to be the ones that are happiest with it when they buy it? Who's really got that problem, or that dream, or that passion, or that opportunity that they need to deal with? Those are the people. So can I give you an example of making a mistake around ideal customer?
Absolutely.
So I was working with a client, and they had this really, really cool software, and it was designed specifically for companies that were working across multiple countries, multiple languages, multiple cultures. And it was a kind of a platform, a sales enablement platform. There's a generic word, right? It was a sales enablement platform, but they were going to conferences and competing with companies to sell to customers who didn't have that complexity. So these customers were saying, well, your thing is so expensive. Well, yes, it's so expensive because it does all of these other things, but those customers didn't care about those other things because they weren't their ideal customers. So when you take your focus off of everybody and really say, well, who's ideal? Then you can say, oh, I need to be looking specifically for companies who are working in multiple countries and multiple language, right? So that's kind of how we go through that process, if that makes sense.
Why do we struggle with saying no? So why, as you're talking through this, the red flag is, well, wait a second, I made it so that everybody could use it and everybody can use it. And And now you're saying, I have to start saying no to people. Why is it? Why do we have to? I'll ask two questions and kind of bake them in together. One, why do we have to say no? Which I think you hit on with one of the challenges that you just went through. Why do we struggle with saying no? Or why do we have to say no? And why do we struggle saying no?
So we have to say no because we have limited resources. And we have to use the resources that we have as efficiently as possible, whether it's me as an individual salesperson or whether it's a startup or a smaller company. Unless you're Coca-Cola, you have limited resources. And even Coca-Cola doesn't have, there's some finite amount. So if I have limited resources, I have to use those resources as efficiently as possible. And the more clear I am about who my ideal customer is, the more directed my message is, the more likely they are to hear it and to respond to it, the more likely I am to be successful closing. So it's kind of like, and I hate this analogy, I need to find a better one, but it's sort of like target shooting or using a shotgun or taking, $100 bill and buying something, or taking dollar bills and throwing them up in the air and seeing where they land.
Come on, it's nice to just make it rain.
Yeah, just make it rain. And they end up wherever they end up, and whoever picks them up may or may not be the right person. And maybe they end up in the gutter, right? So what we want to do is use our resources as effectively and efficiently as possible to get the best possible result. And if I have finite resources, me or one salesperson or 5 salespeople or 20 salespeople, I want to focus them on what is going to get us the best result. So why do we have trouble saying no? Because it feels like we're giving up what we could have. And so what I often help people to make the distinction between is that which I go after and that which I accept. So if the phone rings and it's not my ideal customer, the one that I'm spending money to go after, and now I have to qualify and decide, is this going to end up being a good customer? Are they going to be happy? Are they likely to close? Are they going to be profitable? And if those things are true, then I can go ahead and decide to work with them. If those things aren't going to be true, then I want to qualify them out and send them to somebody who they'll be happier with and not worry about it. Send them to your competition. It's okay. But so I can take those that are not in my narrowest ideal customer profile, but I don't want to spend resources going after those that are not. And so my fear, if I think about it that way, maybe I'm not as afraid to narrow my focus, because then I don't have to say no to people, but I don't have to go after those people. So it's kind of a scarcity mindset, if that makes sense, because we think, I have to take everything that comes. I have to answer every call. I have to respond to every request for proposal. I have to, right? And the truth of the matter is that creates scarcity, because instead of using my resources efficiently, I'm using them inefficiently. And now I'm not getting the result I could by using my resources in a really focused and efficient way.
I think that point on resources is critical. And I'll share a story that I first heard when I was working with Intel, and they talked about the ZBB line, a zero-based budget line. And they basically said that anything that fell below the ZBB line would not get approved. They wouldn't be able to do work. And one of the parts of the value proposition that we were delivering was that if you could get more time, energy, and resource back across your people, it was an ed tech product that we're selling, but would that make it so that you could take projects above the add additional projects above the ZBB line, and how much deeper into your project list could you go through? And on their side, they're looking at it from a what can I do with my resources perspective. And internally, they're selling the idea of, we're going to do a number of projects and we want to make sure we can deliver on all of those projects, and we want to be able to make them come in a certain funding manner. But anybody who's gone through the process of budgeting, whether it's inside your house or inside your business or for your personal time, this concept that Liz is talking about should resonate for you. Because if you're spending a lot of extra time, you think about it in the context of riding a bike, as I mix different stories together. If I'm riding a bike and I'm in one of those really low gears, I can go really fast on a flat line. If I'm on one of those really high gears, I may not be able to go fast on a flat road, but I'm going to be able to go up a hill more efficiently. So use the right gear for the right problem, use the right tool for the right problem. And in the case when it's not your solution for the problem that exists inside customer, make sure you know alternative solutions so that you can introduce them to those solutions. And now you're the person who's helping them solve a problem. And what's fascinating is they'll remember that you helped them solve that problem. And at some point in time, they might become your customer when the fit is a little bit better. So be comfortable saying no. Be comfortable saying no, because if you keep saying yes to everything, you're going to find yourself in a position where the world starts saying no to you. So take
as a founder. So if I think about this as a founder, as a business owner, and I'm thinking about what's my vision for the company and where do I want it to go? If I'm focused on the wrong customers, my company is always going to be pulled in the wrong direction. So I was working with a client, a brilliant guy who had this whole ecosystem built. It was really amazing. And he had a year's worth of funding. So he didn't have to sell anything. The investors did not expect him to sell. They expected him to build this ecosystem. But he really wanted to prove to them that he was doing good stuff. So he was selling. But he was selling. His salespeople were out cherry picking the low-hanging fruit, but it was the wrong stuff. And so I finally said, how is that helping you get where you want to go? Strategically, this is really a bad thing to do. Strategically, you need to build the ecosystem, have your sales team really focused on that. And he was like, oh my goodness. Sometimes you think, I got to do something right now. I've got to make it happen now. I've got to prove. But sometimes in that urgency, we're undermining the long-term effort. On the other hand, if you don't have bandwidth and you don't have runway, sometimes you have to do some selling that maybe isn't the ideal selling. But we really have to think about it. But it's a strategic decision that has to be made at a corporate level.
And I think just reinforcing that it's a decision. And sometimes those decisions, when driven by emotion, driven by some of that urgency, you can think about where you start to make mistakes related to decision making because you create these blind spots for yourself and you're not as thoughtful as you might be. So to Liz's point, go out and get some help, ask some questions, engage with others, get feedback. And if everybody's agreeing with you, watch out, because if everybody's agreeing with you, there's something that you're missing. There's some kind of thing out there. So if everybody agrees with you, watch out, make sure you bring in others, help with those decisions. One of the places I want to go next is in something that's near and dear to your heart, which is the whole idea of pipeline. So let's talk a little bit about pipeline. And for those who are kind of new to this space, when someone says pipeline, or if someone says pipeline, what does that mean? Like, how do you define pipeline?
Okay, and I often use the word funnel, which I'll explain in a minute. So the pipeline is the business, the opportunities that are coming in and moving through the process to close. So that is your pipeline. Your pipeline is all of the opportunities out there that you've identified it's all the opportunities you've identified, right?
Why do you describe it as a funnel? Like so
I use the word funnel because of the visual.
Okay.
So if I think of a pipeline, I think you turn the faucet on, the stuff comes in and goes out and it's equal and even. I turn the faucet off and it stops. I turn it back on and it starts again, so forth.
That sounds magical. It's magical.
Yeah, it's magic. That might work if you have a very, very short sales cycle. It does not work if you have a long sales cycle. So if you have, and let's go back for a second to this idea of a business to business complex sale, meaning you're selling something expensive that's going to change the way an organization works. There's lots of buyers. It tends to take a really long time. It's a complex process. So then you really need to think about a funnel more so, but you need to think about it anyway. So why do I think about a funnel? Well, think about the shape of a funnel, right? So it's wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. It's really kind of more like Swiss cheese funnel because stuff falls out. Right? We qualify stuff out all the way through the process, or they decide they're not going to do it, or their timeline changes, or they decide to go with somebody else, whatever. But so I might start with 10 things in the top of the funnel and come out with one thing at the bottom of the funnel. And so I like to think of it as a funnel to keep my clients really focused on the idea that I got to keep putting a lot of stuff in the top. keep putting stuff in, lots of stuff in, so I can get the few things that I need out the bottom. And that's why I think of it that way. And then when you go further, you can think about ratios and all that stuff, which we can talk about if you want to, but that's why.
I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about the Swiss cheese aspect of the funnel.
Okay. So, it's like a colander or a sieve or Swiss cheese. The idea is that there's holes in it. So everything that goes in the top of the funnel does not come out the bottom, unless you're one of those salespeople that doesn't put it in until you're sure it's going to close.
You mean there's people that sandbag and just kind of wait? Come on, it doesn't happen.
Never. So if that's happening and you're a sales manager and you have somebody in that everything that goes in the top of the funnel comes out the bottom, they're not using their funnel properly. And we can talk about that in a second. So the idea is I have a whole bunch of ideas up in the very top, which is this, vague idea of prospect. These are all these possibilities. And then I start picking and choosing from those possibilities. I can't do all 1,000 ideas that I have because we have 1,000 ideas, right? I could call this guy, I could call that one, I could go to this company. So then you go, okay, I'm going to call this guy, and then I'm going to call this guy, and I'm going to call this person, and then this woman, and whatever. And then I start trying to get them to book appointments with me so I can qualify them. And then when somebody's agreed to have a conversation with me, then I move it from this very high part of prospect to qualify. All that other stuff, some of that other stuff that won't talk to me, I throw away. It goes out. It falls out of the funnel. Now I get into the qualifying, and some of it just hangs out up there. Then I get into the qualifying part of the process. And that's where I'm purposefully looking for opportunities to move people out of my funnel, right? Because I want to use my resources as effectively as possible. And if I try to force a close on a client that's not a good fit, it may not close. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be expensive. The development people and the ops people are all going to be mad at me, right? All that stuff. So I'm looking for the stuff that I want to fall out of the funnel. I want it to go away so I can focus my energy on the stuff that I can move through the funnel and close. And then even when I get into, so I talk about prospect, qualify, cultivate being the next stage of the funnel. So even in that stage where I'm problem solving and doing all this stuff with my clients, some of my clients along the way were going to go, ooh, we can't fix that. Or, ooh, this is not going to work the way we thought. Or wait a minute, you guys haven't upgraded all your software. You're not going to be able to do this until you do all this other work. We're going to have to move this to a year from now. All of these things can happen. Or they go, you know what? I like this other company better. I'm going to do that. Or, you know what? We just discovered we need a new roof. We're not buying anything, right? So stuff's going to go away in that phase. And then hopefully when we get to close, which is the final stage where we're just trying to get the signature and the check, hopefully at that stage, most of that stuff will close. But once in a while, something falls out there too. So that's why I call it the Swiss cheese funnel, because everything that goes in the top is not coming out the bottom. And in a lot of cases, it's like a 1 to 10 ratio. It's not an uncommon ratio from prospect to close.
I think one of the things that you highlighted that's really important is the idea of qualifying out and identifying ways to move people out, because for any number of reasons, either they're not going to be the right fit, they aren't able to, as much as they'd like to work with you, they're just not going to be able to afford it. Technically, they're not going to be able to implement. And it seems like most sales professionals, or many sales professionals, are overly optimistic about their capability to move a deal through the process. So they're constantly leaving things in that really aren't real. And they struggle with the piece that we were talking about earlier, with just asking the question that they know that if they ask, or they believe if they ask, the customer might say no, or not the right fit, or whatever it is, the customer basically exit themselves. They struggle with asking those questions because if it's in there, there's a chance. And if it's not in there, there's no chance. So how do you help people break through that?
Well, let me back up for a second and tell you another story, if you don't mind.
Cool. My stories. Absolutely. I like stories.
So I was working with a company and there were a whole bunch of salespeople and their funnels were cram-packed with garbage.
Okay.
Stuff that was never going to close, stuff that had been there 25 months. Right. And so I'm talking to the CEO and I'm like, we've got to get some new stuff in the funnel. And he says, why would I put anything in the funnel? Their funnels are packed and they can't close anything. I'm like, oh, no. Their funnels are full of garbage. Most of that's not going to close. And he's like, well, what do you mean? So we did some what we call funnel triage, which is going in and saying, tell me about this. Tell me about this. Why hasn't this moved? Who have you talked to? Really asking the questions to help people go, this isn't real. This isn't really going to happen. This isn't really going to happen. And then when he realized what was going on, he's like, you mean if I put more stuff in the top of the funnel, they'll get rid of all this garbage? I'm like, yes, because then they'll feel like they have work to do and they won't be afraid to qualify stuff out. So it's this behavior of the two groups together, the senior leadership and the team, that creates this misinformation. And then you've got an angry CEO all the time, right? So I cram all this stuff in my funnel and it never moves through and it never closes. And so now my CEO's or my sales manager is upset at me all the time. Why isn't anything closing? Why isn't anything closing? So what kinds of conversations do we have? End of the quarter, what's going to close? What's going to close? What's going to close? And nobody knows because nobody really has any real information in the funnel because it's just all nonsense. It's there to keep it looking like you're doing something.
You make it sound like this happens often.
Oh, I've had this conversation so many times. Yes. So what we want to do is keep that funnel or that CRM clean, so that everybody knows what's going on. And because as a business owner, if that funnel is accurate, it is so powerful for me. I know where to put resources. Do I need to add more salespeople? Do I need to add more sales support? Do I need to add more people on the marketing side to get more leads in? Do I need to get ramped up on the production side? But if that funnel is not accurate and I can't predict and I can't believe what you're telling me is in your funnel and when things are really going to close, I, as an owner, can't make good decisions. And so you're mad at me because I don't have the production team or I don't have the leads coming in the top of the funnel or whatever it is that I'm not doing because you aren't telling me the truth about what's really going on. So this partnership of accurate information in the funnel so the CEO can do what you need the CEO to do is hugely powerful.
And it's one of those ways where you can build a high level of trust and confidence inside an organization if you can do these things right. If you can do these things right and you drive, or I wouldn't even say drive. Drive's a little bit strong. Support the right behavior. Support and reinforce the right behavior, which includes celebrating some of those cleanups and being really deliberate, knowing that you've got people on the other side who don't like looking at zeros. They don't like looking at this empty, eroding pipeline. And if we're not deliberate about how we evaluate the pipeline and why it's eroding, then it's really hard for us to make decisions around, are we actually working with the right customers? Are we actually working with the right contacts inside those customers? Are we actually solving an important problem in the marketplace? Does our solution actually solve the problem in the marketplace? Do people actually care about that problem? So there's so much data that you can get out of this when you do it well, rather than going through just the numbers of it. Like, get into it, be comfortable getting into it, get comfortable with people answering questions and asking questions and working your way through it. One of the things I absolutely despise, because I've seen them run so poorly, but I hate pipeline review calls in group settings because, yeah, good. I've seen the nonverbal.
Be in a group. Never in a group.
Why is it that people feel like the pipeline review should happen in a group setting? Why does that happen? Because we've seen a number of organizations where they do this, where so-and-so gets up and they talk about their the deals are going to close, what they're committing to this month or this quarter. And 90% of the group is checked out and they're hoping that person's going to go long so that there's not enough time in the meeting for them to go through their portion of it. So we know that this happens. Why does it continue to persist?
So it persists for a number of reasons. One is because the sales leader doesn't know what else to do during the meeting. So in fact, this is one of the things that I work through with my clients. How do you manage a sales team? What meetings should you have? What should be happening in the meetings? And the best thing that should be happening in a meeting, in a team meeting, is teamwork. Okay, you've been telling me you're struggling with this deal. Let's get the whole team on it. Okay, this is the account we're going to work on today. Let's put it up on the board. You tell us 5 minutes your story. Everybody ask questions. Okay, now let's think of some things we can do to move this sale forward or to qualify it out, right? So because sales leaders don't know what else to do, that's what they do. The other reason is because we have this culture that evolves because we behave this way. So if I'm doing a funnel review with my whole sales team in one meeting, I'm not really doing a funnel review. All I'm doing is checking the very bottom of the funnel to see what's going to close. Now, what happens if I do that? That means my salesperson's focus is where? At the very bottom of the funnel.
Right.
And everybody's focus is at the very bottom of the funnel. So what's happening with all the stuff that's supposed to be moving through the top of the funnel?
100%. Right. Yeah.
Nobody's paying attention to it.
It just sits up
Nobody's coaching around it. Nobody's asking questions about it. We're skipping follow-up because all we're focused on is closing. And so the top of my funnel. So for me as a sales rep, I'm not focused on it. For me as a sales manager, my projections are going to be wrong because we're missing the critical steps in the top of the funnel that are going to help us either qualify out or move it through. So there's just always this frantic focus on what's closing right now, which is the worst focus for a company. So what I want to do in my sales meeting is focus on the things that matter. I want to focus on, and as a salesperson, this is what I want. I want updates. One, how is the team doing? Where do we stand towards our numbers? Maybe who's the winner this week? I don't know, if you got a little competition going, right? So that's where we want to start. Then we want to talk about what's new. What updates are there? What new marketing materials are there? What new products are there? Whatever it is, what are our partners doing? And then we want to do a team exercise, right? That's what we do as a team, things that everybody in the team can be involved in together. And they're never more than an hour. Now, when do I do a funnel review? It's a one-on-one. And guess what? They take an hour.
Why do they take
45 minutes.
Why do they take so long?
Because if I'm doing my job, reviewing the funnel, I'm reviewing every stage of the funnel. So I start with what's going to close. Tell me what's going on with this. Is it really going to close? Did you do this? Did you do this? Are these steps done? Is there how is legal doing their part from our side? What do we need to do to make sure this is going to close? Is it 50% chance it's going to close or 75% chance it's going to close? So we're having a conversation. I'm not beating up my sales rep, but I'm saying to them, what's going on? What do you need from us? Can we get this to close? When is it really going to close? It's a conversation. Then we go to the top of the funnel, because what if I don't put stuff in the top of the funnel?
It's not going to make it down to the bottom of the funnel.
If there's nothing in the top, it's not coming down the bottom. So I'm going to stay focused on stuff that's never going to close. It's just going to sit and bounce around in my funnel. So what have you done, sales rep, to put stuff in the top of your funnel? How's your prospecting going? Is it working? Is it not working? What help do you need from marketing? What help do you need from me? Are you spending enough time? Do you want to set some KPIs around number of calls, or do you want to start thinking about refers? How can I help you be successful? Then we want to talk about qualify. Wow, you got all this stuff in qualify, in the process of qualifying. What's going on there? How many of these do you think are really going to qualify? And then you're going to go into the final stage, which is when we cover the bases and we talk to all the people and we solve all the problems and we handle the objections and we meet with everybody. And it's a very long, time-consuming process, sometimes months and months, right? So did you talk to this person? Did you talk to this person? Did you check on the buying process? Do you know what purchasing's doing? Who's the final? All these questions that need to be asked. And it's not that you're beating them up. We're just going through it and having a discussion. And if somebody says it's stuck, this one's stuck. Great, let's get the team on it, right? So the reason we don't do funnel reviews is because, one, we don't know how as leaders. Two, we beat up our people so they don't want to do them, so they hate doing them. So it's just a nightmare. So what we need to do is, as sales leaders and managers and founders, is learn how to do a funnel review in a way that our team wants to do it because they're getting support from us. And they're getting a second set of eyes on their sales. Oh, shoot, I should have called that guy back, right? Whatever it is. But if you go in and you beat up your sales team, they're never going to want to do them with you. So that's why it takes so long. And if you have a really great sales rep and you guys do them regularly, you maybe can get through it in 15 minutes. But a lot of sales reps require that hour of support and coaching.
I think one of the things to take away from what Liz just shared as she was going through this is the importance of there being some kind of value exchange that's happening in the context of that conversation, so that the rep on the other side, the person on the other side, the human being that's inside your organization who's engaging directly with customers has an opportunity to ask for help if they need to ask for help, You have an opportunity to provide help if there's a way to provide help. Either way, you don't get into a situation where someone is constantly out there failing alone, failing on their own, where they're just struggling and they may not know why they're struggling. And what's fascinating when you do this with teams where you've got multiple people inside an organization, you may have a rep who is really, really good at solving specific problems, getting things unstuck out of one stage. And then you may have another rep who's really good at getting things to move forward in another stage. And imagine what happens when you bring those two reps together to work on those problems with each other. And now you build the team up rather than being the one who's always going in and berating them about how come these things are stuck or why, it doesn't. When we look at your average days in qualification, you're at 72 days and so over here is at 27 days. Why are you not able to qualify things out? There's something going on. And if you can bring the team together, everybody can learn. And this doesn't have to be overly complicated. We make it overly complicated when we make everybody walk through those numbers because they just feel like they're on stage. And to Liz's point, the primary focus is what's happening in the here and now. And then everybody starts wondering, why is everything so urgent? Why are we always just so focused on month to month to month to month to month? It's because we didn't take the time, energy, and patience to start saying, you know what, it's the things I'm doing today that are going to lead to success tomorrow or the next day. And I think the next place I'd like to go, we had a brief conversation before we turn the mics on, but you had talked about prioritization. How does all of these things that we're talking about, how does it feed into prioritization? And how do you think about prioritization?
So if I'm a salesperson, I have very limited time compared to the amount of work that I need to do. Whether I need to be prospecting because I don't have enough in my funnel or whatever it is. But if I have a funnel and it is well maintained, I can, first of all, there are certain things that are automatic prioritization. The very first thing is closing business. That's the first thing. And I know what the steps are for closing business, right? I know how to do that. I know what needs to get done. So that's the first thing. Now, if I move up the funnel the other way and I start spending time on cultivate, which is what we do. And why do we do that as salespeople? Because we know these people, it's comfortable, it's easy. I can chat with them, right? So we do what's easy, but it takes a ton of time and it needs to take a ton of time, but we need to make our next priority filling the top of the funnel. So if I'm moving stuff out of the bottom of the funnel, I'm moving two things out of the bottom of the funnel. How many things do I need to put in the top of the funnel? Probably 20. If I only put in 6, I'm not getting 2 out the bottom, right? So I need to make sure that I'm constantly putting stuff in the top of the funnel. So that's my very first prioritization, right? The second thing that we want to do in terms of prioritization in the funnel is think about this time when we're qualifying our leads as our opportunity to say, where do I want to spend my time? Do I want to spend my time on the phone with this guy who's a total jerk and won't answer my questions and is really difficult to work with? Or that woman from that other company who answered my questions, knows what she wants, knows what her timeline is. Let's qualify this guy out. Let's focus on people like her that are doing what I want to do and qualify out the jerk. Or maybe in that process, I know I need to do some balancing. I need to have some big leads that I'm working on, and I need to have a whole bunch of small ones because the big leads take a really long time and I need to keep closing these little ones. So I need to make sure I have balance, but I need to figure out what that balance is so I can prioritize my work. It's really about looking at what's going on and saying, how do I spend my time the way that's most efficient? And it's never spending time on leads that aren't going to close. It's never spending time keeping leads in the funnel because I didn't put anything in the top. So I'm going to just chase what I have floating around in there, regardless of how bad it is. So that's how it helps us.
Another thing that you highlighted there is, and I think about this in the context of baseball, singles, doubles, triples, and home runs. Everybody would love to just be the big game hunter who all they do is close these really, really large, massive deals. And those are the only deals that they work on. There's a lot of risk in playing that game, depending on what your role is inside the organization, where opportunities are sourced, maturity of the organization. I get all of that. But in the context of working with founders, startup engagements, there's a lot of risk in constantly chasing the really big things. Now, those big things can be really exciting when they come in. But as Liz was talking through it, she talked about having some smaller ones that are going to move through the process a little bit faster so that you can, one, continue to get the reps engaging with people. And many times those people, after they solve the problem with your solution, they go to one of those larger companies at some point in the road, and they're down the road, and they're really excited about working with you, and they bring you along. But how do you work with people to help them understand the value in planning out their territory in the context of whether it's small, medium, and large, shorter term opportunities versus longer term opportunities, singles, doubles, triples, home runs? Like, how do you like to talk through this?
So I go through it and I create either a sales strategy for a company or a territory strategy with an individual. And we look at a whole bunch of things. So the first thing is, if I'm doing a sales strategy for a company, we want to look at the different products. We want to look at the different sales reps. We want to look at different industries. We want to look at different size of companies. And in doing that, so we start with a number. Somebody came up with a number somehow. It was an investor. Maybe it was just a big dream. Whatever it is, we have a number. Now we've got to figure out whether it's really possible to get there and what's the best path to get there. So, and the other thing is, remember, strategic. So if everybody's selling this product that is the closest fastest, but is the least profitable, I'm losing money. So how am I spreading my team's time across these different products? Maybe this one goes first and then we sell these others, which means that I need to have a plan for growing accounts. Or if it's a one-time sale to everybody, then I need to be thinking about which products do I want them focused on. And we want to think about industries. Some industries are going to be more volatile than other industries. We never want to put all our eggs in one basket if we can help it.
Such an important point. So when you say not all your eggs in one basket, what does that mean?
On anything.
Yeah.
On all in one big client, all in one product, all in one industry. But we learned during COVID, this was one of the big COVID lessons. All my stuff is in bars, and bars all closed. My company's dead in the water, right? So if we have and sometimes there's no choice. I use that example. A friend of mine, he built a product and that's who he built it for. There's nobody else to do it with. But I don't know, maybe he could sell it at restaurants and hospitals or something. But anyway, they don't serve a lot of booze in hospitals. Anyway.
Maybe they should.
What?
I said, maybe they should.
Having spent time in hospitals with patients, I think they should. But if I can spread out to a variety of industries and maybe I don't need hundreds, but maybe I need 3 that will balance me in different kinds of economic environments, that might be a good thing. So how much am I spending in each of these industries? Which products go to which industries? It's just sort of a matter of how much on new, how much on existing, how much on each product, how much on each industry, just sort of mapping it out on a spreadsheet, how you want to do this based upon length of sales cycle, based upon fit, based upon profit, all of those things. And believe it or not, that sounds really simple. It takes me about 6 to 8 hours to do that with a client.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the breaking things out into 3 different buckets, just so that you start to, you're not going high risk and everything is in one basket. You've got three baskets. And then even inside those 3 baskets, there might be 3 segments so that we can start to de-risk ourselves in either of those areas. Now it becomes a challenge though, when people start to look at it and say, well, why are you only limiting yourself to that? And then it goes back to the piece that you were talking about before around ideal customer. And the reason why we limit it is because we're resource constrained. We've got to be deliberate about where do we place our bets. And when we see those things work out, then we can start to place more in other areas.
So we've just talked about the strategy for all company, but then what about as an individual? How do I create my territory plan or my territory strategy? And you kind of want to do the same thing. Who are the clients I have that I can grow? Because this is a huge thing. I see your smile. This is a huge thing. We leave so much money on the table by not growing our existing accounts. And we open ourselves up to have competitors come in and take business because they're solving problems for our customers and we aren't. So the first thing is, how much time am I going to spend on growing existing accounts and how much growth. So if I have a number that I have to hit, how much growth can I get from the relationships that I already have? Here's what we know. Faster sales cycle, more chance that it's going to close, more chance they'll buy more from you in the future. So how much time can I spend on that successfully? And what percentage of my revenue is that going to be? Then the next question is, how much is brand new clients? And where are those brand new clients coming from? Are they coming from the marketing department? Are they coming from me doing LinkedIn work, going out to people I know and seeing if they can refer me? How am I getting those new leads? Am I passively waiting or am I actively going after it? And then I also want to look at my existing work and think about, okay, so of these new leads, how much are going to come from the trade shows I have to go to? And what do I have to do to make sure I get that number of leads from my trade show? How much is going to come from my referrals? What work do I have to do to make sure that I get that from my referrals? How much do I think is going to come from the marketing department? How successful have I been closing those? What do I have to do differently? Or maybe they're not really good leads and I need to let people know that these aren't really qualified leads. So really looking at how am I going to break down this work so I can hit that number? And then what has to happen to make those individual activities successful? So that's really how I do a territory.
I think that piece is one of the questions I like to ask in this context is what needs to be true in order that, and it could be any number of things. It could be that I hit my number, that I bring in the number of customers I want to bring in, that we grow the business by whatever percent, that we increase the number of leads that are coming into the organization, but what needs to be true. And another thing that I think is a good practice for people to follow, and there are some people who will raise eyebrows around this one, but I think it's a good practice to say, what needs to be true in order for me to hit my number, my whole number in just this specific vertical, and then split that out across 3. So how many singles would I have to hit in order to hit my entire number? How many doubles would I have to hit? How many small companies would I have to work with? How many large organizations would I have to work with? Because then you can start to deconstruct your approach to going after the market when you're thinking about that prospecting piece. Really critical to go through that whole territory plan. Go. Yeah.
So, but here's the next piece of that. So let's go back to the funnel for a minute, because this ties in really nicely.
Yeah.
So how many pieces of closed business at what average value to hit this number for this vertical? Okay. So I have this vertical. I want to hit this number. I have to close this many leads at this average price, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's true, how many do I have to have in cultivate? How many do I have to have in qualify? Because chances are I'm going to qualify. I might need 7 in qualify because I might qualify out 5. How many do I need to have up in prospect so that I can, because some of them are never going to answer my call or respond to me. And that process of going, and then if that's true, and if marketing's helping, how many sales qualified leads do I need? How many marketing qualified leads do I need? How many conversions does it take to get to a marketing, all of these things. So this sales math, it's not that hard, but it's really important.
And it can be freeing when you actually do it, because then you can say, you know what, this is going to be hard, but I can see how I can get there, rather than just going through the day-to-day activities of, time to make the donuts, time to get on and start making phone calls, or it's time to start sending out LinkedIn connections, or it's time to do whatever. That activity might feel okay because you went through and you were doing work, but did it really matter? Did it really count? And I think as you just think through so many of the things that Liz has shared in this conversation around the importance of understanding those funnel metrics, being able to look at where things are going to move through pipeline. How do you prioritize both hitting on the things that are going to close here in the short term, but then going back up to the top and making sure that there are things that are moving through? You can really simplify your approach to going out there and winning business, whether you're talking about it as an individual rep or as an entire organization. Liz, this has been absolutely awesome. Liz, as we wrap up the conversation, there's a lot of talk out there about KPIs and measurements and all of these things that are out there. When the KPI acronym comes up, what comes to mind for you?
Oh, artificial. That's the first thing that comes up, is that we have all these artificial KPIs. You have to make this many phone calls. You have to do this. So what we really know is we know there's a certain amount of math that goes with the funnel, but then let's not make artificial expectations around it. So if I have to have this many leads coming into the top of my funnel, don't tell every single sales rep that necessarily means they need to make 300 phone calls. Maybe they need to make 10 phone calls to good referrers. Maybe they need to get on their LinkedIn. So let's make sure that whatever the KPIs, whatever the measures, the expectations about what exactly each sales rep needs to do to hit their goal, that they're appropriate for the sales rep, that we don't have these artificial numbers that we're measuring. How many phone calls did you make today? I don't know. Does it matter? I closed this many deals. I'm way ahead of my quota, and you're still hounding me about the number of phone calls I made today. Be appropriate for the person that you're working with. So we have some general numbers that we know. Now let's make it right for the person that we're working with. Let's not kill people with KPIs. That's my only one thing that follows that.
That's awesome. It gets into the whole kind of measure what matters. And this is something I'm historically, I would say I'm pretty good at being really deliberate about the things we measure. But when you get into a mode where you're just constantly going and there's a lot of things that are happening and then there's a lot of noise out there, you can find yourself in a situation where you're not leading through that noise. So in the absence of leadership, in the absence of guidance, in the absence of direction, people start asking a lot of those questions because they either see it in a blog post, they read it in a book, they heard it on a podcast, and now they're wondering, well, hey, this is what the numbers look like. What are our numbers? How do those have to go out? So I think it's important for leaders to lead. It's important for reps to communicate. And it's important for us to remember, what's our general objective? Like, what are we really aiming for? What are we shooting to accomplish as we go through this? And how can we simplify it as we go through? Liz, absolutely awesome conversation. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. Where can people find out more about what you're working on, and where would you like to send folks?
So 2 places to come find me. Well, 3 places now. One is go to LinkedIn, connect with me if you want to continue a conversation, whatever it is, and just tell me where you found me so I know, because I get so many LinkedIn requests from people. I don't know who they are. I'm not sure if I should connect or not. So just tell me where you found me and connect, and we'll have a conversation. My website is Regarding Sales.com. And there's tons of content in there that you can find about, sales and process. And you can download your sales operating guide if you want to, or your sales strategy guide if you want to. Both of those things are there. And then the third place is, if you're on Clubhouse, come find us on Clubhouse. I'm there, and just Liz Heiman, Heiman, and you can find me and follow me and see what I'm doing.
Liz, thank you very much. We'll make sure we include links in the show notes. Make sure you follow Liz. Make sure you check us out on Clubhouse with the Sales Talk Radio on Saturday mornings. And Liz is out there during the week as well. I tend to just show up every other Saturday. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sell podcast. If you know of someone who would enjoy this episode, please share it with them and let us know via social media, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn. Let us know that you've shared it. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?